Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, although it's probably not the same kind of webinar maybe you were expecting, and that's because things do come up. So why did I end up deciding to just do a pre-recorded video? Things come up in life, and I had already planned to do the webinar, so here we are with the same information you were going to get, just I am not actually physically talking to you at this moment. But I will still be available for any questions you have. So you can pop on over to the Facebook group and you're going to see that linked in the webinar space. So if you need to get to that, you can go to the Facebook group and ask questions there. And you're more than welcome to DM me on Instagram or email me in any way. All that information will be available to you so that you can ask me any questions that you have. So speaking of strategies and ways that we do things, this entire webinar is going to be about building the unique, the actionable, and purpose-driven strategies for your business. Okay, so I throw these words around a lot. You hear unique, you hear actionable, you hear purpose-driven, they sound great, but what do they actually mean? So unique. That one's a little more clear. That means that this strategy would then be something that works for you. It's unique to you. So maybe it's not something most people do, or maybe it's something that no one else does but you. So unique. I think that's important because that means that you've created something that, it works for you. And I think that's really important. Actionable. So this one is, hear this word a lot and it sounds great. And we're like, yes, actionable, throw it around. It's really important to understand what that means. So when you create these strategies, you have to be able to actually act on them. There's a lot of times when we can all build checklists and to-do lists and step-by-step things. We can all build those things, but if we don't actually act on them, what's the point, right? So we have to make sure that there's something that we can actually do. That's really important. So the last one, purpose-driven. So one of the big things that I want to get across to people is that everything you do should have a purpose. You don't just create a strategy just because everyone else is doing it or just so you can have a strategy. So it's kind of like you wouldn't create a social media strategy or marketing strategy that's just like, oh, well, I'm just going to kind of like put stuff out there. That's not a strategy. I mean, it is a strategy technically, but it's not purpose driven. There isn't a purpose behind it or a reason why you're doing any of the things that you're doing. And you want to make sure that everything you're doing has a reason to it. If there is no reason, then why are you doing it? So maybe you should just toss that one out. So we'll get into all of that, but just wanted to explain what all those words meant and why they were important. So obviously in this, I'm not going to give you specific strategies. I'll be giving you examples, but I'm going to tell you kind of how to walk the process of walking through creating them. And then of course, the one thing that you need to make sure that you do after you've created them and started implementing to them, which is really, really important. And it's going to seem really obvious when you see it. You're going to be like, oh, well, duh. But it's super important and I want to impress it on everyone. So let's get to the actual webinar. I'm going to share my screen now. Aha! Look at this. This is my first time doing a webinar, you all. This is really exciting. Anyway, so you see all these words, you know what we're getting into. Let's dive into it. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so if you don't know me, and I know a lot of you do, but if you don't know me, hi, I'm Domi. I didn't actually say that in the beginning, but I'm Domi, and I'm the INFP business coach, or biz coach, if you want to put it in like really casual terms, because that's who I am. Never seen the term INFP before? No worries. It's a Myers-Briggs personality type thing. I use personality typology in my coaching. So I will have people maybe take tests. And so I'll kind of incorporate a whole bunch of things like Myers-Briggs and Enneagram and human design and astrology and strengths finders and all sorts of things. And I have new ones coming in all the time. It's really exciting. And I kind of put those all together to kind of figure out who that person is so that we can make sure that whatever coaching style I'm using and how I'm speaking to them and the action items I'm giving them are in line with who they are. So I find that really important. And so in order to help my clients create business strategies, whether it's productivity ones or marketing ones, or even just accountability, I use personality typology to do that. And of course, a little bit of intuition. That's what the N in INFP does stand for, by the way. It's intuitive. And my overall goal is always to help people overcome overwhelm and develop clarity, confidence, and excitement. So if you're interested in any of that, let me know and I'd be happy to talk further, but that's not what this webinar is about. So let's move forward. Dun-dun. What will we learn today? So if you've seen my Instagram posts, then you will kind of know a little bit about this. The first step always is understanding yourself. And I kind of talked about this a little bit. Let me move this so it's not literally on. There we go. Much better. I'm going to have to move that around a lot, I think. First step, always understanding yourself. The 5 things that you must understand about yourself in order to create the right strategies for you. And this is something that it's going to be a list, and a lot of it's going to seem kind of obvious, but I think for a lot of us, we should really be writing these down. Write them down when you're building the strategies. Write down what these 5 things are for you. And that way you don't forget them. I know sometimes we're like, oh, well, we have it in our heads. No, for a lot of us, and not all of us, but I've seen the personality types. I've been asking in a lot of Facebook groups, and I've seen the personality types of most people who've been commenting. And a lot of them are intuitives like me and not sensors. That might make no sense to you, but pretty much what that boils down to is that a lot of you are probably maybe more in your minds and are less likely to kind of put things down physically or like be more self-aware. And the first step to do that is to write things down, put it on a physical piece of paper, or if you need to on your computer, somewhere where it's down there so that there's something physical shown. And through that process, you're probably going to find a little more, you're going to find that's a little easier to kind of bring it to life because you've kind of written it down. Or you might find that it's harder to write what you were thinking than you thought. And that means that maybe the messaging or what you were trying to get across isn't that clear. Really important to understand. Step 2 is actually creating the right strategies. So there are 4 questions that I think that you must answer when you're creating these strategies so that they are actionable and they are purpose-driven. The unique part comes from understanding yourself. So, and also comes from step 3, which is the final must-do step, which I'm not saying right now because that just makes it more exciting and suspenseful. But it's going to be really obvious when you see it, I promise. But it's very, very important. I'll explain why. Anyway, let's move on to understanding yourself. And I'm gonna have to move this again. Jeez. Do you like this woman, by the way? Like she looks super shocked. I really love the photo. So understanding yourself, the 5 things you must know. Your strengths, of course, your weaknesses, your fears. Ooh, that's an interesting one. Your desires and motivations, and your goals and visions. So let's kind of break this down a little bit. Strengths, pretty obvious. I think when we go into business, one of the first things that like most of us will think about, I'm like, what am I good at? Right? So that one makes a little bit of sense. Do make sure to consider other strengths that maybe are things that you aren't doing in your business right now. So for example, for me, I'm a business coach right now, right? But I am a writer. I've always been a writer and I like writing. So I make sure to incorporate that strength. I like to sing and I like to write songs. I am planning on incorporating that into some of my marketing, which is an interesting way to do things. And so I'm going to be doing that. That's just some examples for me, but you think of that in terms of you. One of the things I do want to impress upon when it comes to using your strengths is that whatever you're doing for your business, so for me, it's business coaching, that action, that thing that you're actually offering, the service, should be a strength, of course, but don't forget to also incorporate your strengths into your actual processes. So your actual marketing strategies, your onboarding process, your whatever process it is you take your clients through, for example, make sure you incorporate your strengths into that as well, because that will help really strengthen the offer that you have. Yes, you're actually offering them a skill of yours, but all your processes should also be in line with that, or else you're going to find that you're really good at something, but you just can't implement it properly. So your weaknesses, also important to remember. I think a lot of times, like what we want to, like first of all, we'll kind of ignore our weaknesses or push them to the side. What we want to be doing is minimizing them. So finding ways in which we maybe don't have to use them. So maybe if you're not great at sales, maybe that is a strong weakness of yours. You're not good at sales because you're not good at influencing people that well. That's a little broad, of course, but maybe you don't have to do sales in the way that you imagine sales, in the way that, is your weakness. Maybe you could do it in a different way. And that's how you have to kind of think about them. It's like, okay, so this is my weakness. How can I find a way to use my strength instead to get the same result? And Also with weaknesses, that's another kind of point where you can look at it and be like, well, maybe when I start building a team, I should start outsourcing this stuff. So if you're really not good at social media caption writing, maybe you need to outsource it. Because maybe that's something that you're like, okay, well, I definitely need this to get to my goal, but like I have a hard time doing it. Maybe I need to outsource it. So that's also something to consider when it comes to weaknesses. And I'm going through and explaining why all of these pieces are important to understand about yourself in terms of strategy. So bear with me. Your fears. Now that's kind of an interesting one. And this is why I actually use Enneagram, because Enneagram is a personality type system that isn't so much a personality as just kind of like a growth system that identifies your basic fear. It's like very basic and like innate and like just in you. And then your kind of basic desire and motivation based on that fear. So, so a lot of people they'll take the Enneagram test and they find that maybe they match with all of them or match with a little bit of them. We all have different fears, but the idea is that there's like one kind of base one that's kind of like your gut reaction. And some of the descriptions online are super weird, but like if you study a little bit more, you'd understand it. And I'm happy to help you if you ever wanted to take the Enneagram test. Truity has kind of a really basic one that can kind of give you a sense of where you might fall. In any case, understanding your fears, super important. And why it's important is because your fears are what are going to try and lead you. Your fear is kind of led by your ego, right? And it's what's going to try and lead you off track. It's like maybe you're going to think you're being logical and practical, but it's going to kind of lead you away from your strengths and maybe more towards your weaknesses because like it thinks that's how you need to do things, something like that. So understanding what your actual fears are, what you're afraid of, and writing it down because that makes it more real, right? Is super, super important. So that way you can be aware when you run into these roadblocks and you can kind of plan for these roadblocks ahead of time. We like the sound of that, right? We like to plan for these sort of things ahead of time if we can. So plan for like when I start being afraid or when I start like, making excuses for myself because I'm afraid. Now I'm going to be able to recognize when that is. So another thing in this category of fears is to kind of understand, okay, so how do I react to fear, right? How do you react to fear? What do you do? And maybe for you, again, it's making excuses. Maybe when you're scared, you start making excuses. And that's something really, and I've seen a lot of people do that. If you know personality typology at all, I see this especially in a lot of ENFJs and INFJs and that sort of ESFJs, that sort of type. FJs, let's put it that way. All of us make excuses, but I see it especially in that type because it's so easy for them to have internal logic that they think makes sense to them, but externally doesn't make much sense to everyone else. So it does come off as excuses. So that's something important to understand too, how you react to it. So that way you can recognize when you're doing it. And it's frustrating, but calling yourself out, super important. There's a reason I call my podcast calling you out, right? Okay. Next one, your desires and motivations. So this is pretty obvious, but like you might kind of combine it accidentally with your goals and visions. Two different things. Two very different things in this instance. So your desires and motivation. So what's motivating you? Like what's maybe the base? And this can also be part of your fears. Maybe one of your fears are motivating you. What do you really want that's motivating you? And this does not have to be related to business at all, but maybe it could be something as basic as like, I want security financially. I want financial security and stability. Maybe that is a motivation for you. So thinking about your desires and motivations, again, this is going to kind of help you, first of all, figure out how to break past fears, because if you have these desires and motivations, a lot of times they can actually help you break past your fears along with your strengths. And also these are kind of going to be one of those things that you'll look at and be like, well, I really want this, right? Like it remind you of what you want. And now your goals and visions. So desires and motivations, I feel like are a little more abstract and a little more like all encompassing of a lot of things. And they're kind of what are driving you. Your goals and visions, that's the end of it. It's not necessarily, it could be part of your motivations. Sure. For some people, your vision is a part of your motivation. But it is a separate thing unto itself. This is maybe what you see in your mind. This is like how you see the end goal of your business or your life. And it's important to write these down. There are short-term goals and visions, and there are long-term goals and visions. Write them all down if you have them. You should always have some of them, right? Don't have too many though. I'm gonna warn against it. Like, you're gonna have them in your head, but like when you're actually working towards some, don't work towards too many, because you're gonna find yourself overly busy with pointless and meaningless busy work that isn't really getting you anywhere. It's just very frustrating. So desires and motivations, kind of like what's driving you, what's fueling the engine, what is like a basic want, like a very basic primal instinctual need of yours and desire. We'll put it that way. And then your goal and vision, what's the end goal? Well, what are you driving to? And I always recommend doing some sort of vision board. And if you're not like a visual person, or you don't like, scrapbooking or whatever it is, you can make a digital one on Canva. Or you can also, write it down. Like it could be a story. That's also a vision board. Like maybe your vision is more like you're better at writing, and that's your vision board. That's kind of what I prefer, honestly. I like writing. So that's something to it. So these are all the 5 things that I think are really important for you to understand about yourself in order to make these strategies. And I do recommend going through this and writing them down before you really start building new strategies. Or if you already have strategies, write these things down and then see if the strategies align. You can do it that way too, if you really need to, because a lot of us have already begun, right? So definitely write them down, I swear. And if you do write them down, you want to share them, feel free to tag me in an Instagram story, or, send it to me in an email and have me look over it. I'm more than happy to do that for you. Let's see what we got. All right. Creating the right strategies. What are the 4 questions that you must answer? Okay. So now we're in the actual creation mode, right? It's time to actually create these strategies. So everyone has a different process for actually creating some. Some of them, again, checklists can count as a strategy. Maybe one of your strategies involves a spreadsheet. Maybe it involves, there's a lot of things. Most of the time I like to write down step-by-step things if I can, because that for me is very helpful. In other cases, maybe they prefer to kind of wing it a little bit, but having some sort of blueprint is obviously helpful. Just when you're creating them, answer these questions, right? And some of them are tied to understanding yourself. That's kind of the point, right? All right, come on, go away. Anyway, so what is the problem or task you need to address with this strategy? So this is obviously really important. In order to have a purpose-driven strategy, to have a purpose to it, you need to know what you're trying to fix. What are you trying to do with the strategy? So let's take a marketing strategy, for example. What are you trying to do? You're trying to make yourself more visible to clients, right? You're trying to get yourself out there so clients can see you. You're trying to promote yourself. Those are the kind of purposes you're looking at. Marketing strategy is an easy one to understand, but this should go for pretty much any strategy or any process that you create, even an onboarding process. What's the problem or task you're needing to address with that? Well, if you are onboarding a client, maybe you just need to make it a smooth transition from getting all the information from them so that you can start working with them, right? Because maybe you've tried before and some of them didn't really sign the contracts in time. They didn't pay in time. It was all a mess and a jumble and you didn't get the information you needed. Maybe that was a problem you're running into. And so you create an onboarding process so that it's more streamlined. And that's the purpose of creating it, right? So you do this for everything. And this can also include your productivity tasks, your strategies, maybe your strategy for how you manage your time throughout the day. So always, and I know it seems obvious, but you're going to find when you look back, there are quite a few things that you've maybe start doing. You're like, wait, I didn't actually know what the purpose was, or there was a purpose, but you didn't know it. So the strategy wasn't quite aligned with the purpose. So it was kind of like, oh, this was the purpose of doing it, but now I find that, it's not addressing that purpose. Oh, okay. Well, maybe I need to fix something, right? So what strengths or skills do you have that you can use to address this problem? And this is something I think a lot of people miss out on. Like they'll just be like, okay, this is a problem I need to address. This is the goal I want to get, which is the next question. They'll do those parts usually, but they'll forget that you have strengths that you can use to address these problems. And you don't have to just copy someone else and use that strategy to get to the end goal, because you're just gonna, if you're not good at whatever it is, if you're, leaning into a weakness maybe, or, it's there's a million other reasons why it could happen. If you don't consider what strengths you have and actually try and use them in this strategy, then you're going to find that it just doesn't work for you. And it's going to get really frustrating. You're going to be like, why me? Maybe I'm just not cut out for this. And that's not the case. You're just not thinking about how you can implement the strategy in a way that works for you. That is very important. You, right? It's your strategy. You're doing it. It's not selfish to think like this because it's the one, it's for you. Like this is for your business and you. So you have to think like that. So always think about, again, what strengths and skills you have. Again, remember I said that I like to sing, and I like to sing and write music. So I'm planning to incorporate that into some of my marketing strategy because it's something I'm good at. And I find like I'm not always as good at maybe relating to people or something that I've seen someone else do. And maybe, I've compared myself and tried to copy them and I find it never works. Me reaching out to people and being super salesy never works for me. So I'll use my other strengths to kind of like build another strategy that maybe is going to work better. And it's all about testing because you're going to find that some things don't work and some things do, and you have to kind of experiment a little bit. We'll get a little bit more into that. But yeah, always think about what strengths or skills you actually have, and they can seem unrelated, but you can find a way to incorporate it into, trust me. But think of what strengths and skills you do have that you can use towards whatever strategy you are doing. So like, again, for me, in my coaching program and my offer, I incorporate a lot of writing and writing of reports because I communicate best in writing. So that is why I wanted to incorporate that into my program. And people have appreciated it so far because it's super clear. And it's probably a lot more clear than me speaking to them on a screen, to be completely honest. So that's one of those things you can do and think about. You don't always have to do things the way everyone else does it. In fact, don't. Or maybe start out that way and then tweak it so it works for you. So yeah, consider strengths and skills, super important, one that most people miss. What is the end goal and what are you trying to accomplish or achieve? You should already have your goals and visions kind of down, but this is obviously the end goal for the specific strategy. So what are you trying to achieve? Like, obviously you're trying to address the problem, but like what does that look like? What does addressing the problem actually look like for you? So think about that. And again, that's one of the things that most people will kind of consider, but just make sure that you are, and make sure that, if it helps, write it down, especially if you're more of a person that keeps things in your head. Writing it down really helps kind of put it into real words, and you'll kind of realize maybe you don't fully understand. Maybe in your head it made sense, but written down it doesn't. And that can actually explain a lot of things. So yeah, important to consider. Last question, how will you maintain consistency and measure success? Ooh, now this is an interesting one. This is actually going to lead into the third part, the one that I haven't mentioned yet. It's going to seem really obvious. And this is where also a lot of people fall apart because they didn't consider their strengths or skills, perhaps. They aren't able to maintain consistency. They're not able to keep it up. And that can get really frustrating, right? That can seem like you're just falling apart. You're like, why is that? Maybe I'm not cut out for this. I'm just not disciplined enough. I'm too lazy. And half the time that's not the problem. The problem is that you've just chosen something that doesn't work for you. So when you're making these strategies, you have to think long and hard. This is where you'll kind of think back on who you are, understanding yourself, and be like, okay, am I going to be able to keep up with this? And at some point, discipline does have to be, instilled. So you have to be like, okay, so in order to maintain consistency, I know myself. So I know that I can only do this particular strategy or thing. I can only do it 10 minutes a day. Let's just say that that's how it works. Or maybe if it comes to say, a marketing strategy, how will you maintain consistency? Well, maybe I do better in spurts. So I have to, I'll create the entire month's worth of social media stuff in one day. But that's just how I need to work. Maybe that's how I maintain consistency because I do it all in one day and I schedule the day every month and that's when I do it. Maybe that's your way of doing it. Or maybe you need an accountability person. Maybe you're like, okay, I know I'm going to fall off the track, so I need someone to hold me accountable. That's how you maintain consistency. Now, how do you measure success? That's the other side of things. So how do you know if you've reached the end goal, basically? And this is when, this is one of those parts, you probably heard of SMART goals, I almost forgot what the entire thing was. It was like measurable, attainable, SMART. Basically, if you look it up, SMART goals, you'll see what I'm talking about. Every letter in SMART stands for a certain thing that all goals should be. So basically, your goal needs to be measurable in some way. So if your goal is to, I don't know, let's just say your goal is to get 100 followers per week or something like that. Maybe that's part of your marketing strategy, your marketing goal. Whatever it is. Let's just say that is part of your goal. So in that case, that one's measurable because you'll know if you hit 100 followers a week, right? There are other ones that seem like a little less measurable though. Okay. Right. So let's just say like productivity. You've set yourself a time management goal. Maybe measuring success in that case is like, okay, did I work this many hours a week? Maybe. Or maybe in some cases, measuring success can even be as simple as, did I feel good about what I was doing? Like, did I feel like I was being productive? And if you didn't, then maybe it's like, okay, well, I didn't feel like I was being productive. And the point of that whole thing was to feel more productive. So maybe something needs to change, right? Maybe I need to do something a little bit different. And obviously, there is gray area in that. And you have to, running it by other people so that they can kind of tell you, okay, well, maybe you're being too hard on yourself is another thing in and of itself. But I think we all kind of understand, like, when we feel unproductive versus when we don't, or we seem unproductive, whatever term you want to use. Because there are days like, it'll seem like barely anything got done, but I felt productive because I was doing what I said I was going to do. And then there are other days when I'm just like feel entirely unproductive, even though I was working all day. You know what I mean? I think some of us run into that. So yeah, just make sure that there's some sort of measurement for success so that you can see if you're hitting the goals. And if you're not hitting your end goal, then maybe you have to be like, okay, let's reevaluate this and go back. Which takes us into the next and final step. The final most important step. I forgot I created the slide. Yes, the final and most important step. And I just said the word. Can you guess it? Yes, it's reevaluate. And I know it seems so obvious, right? It seems so obvious, like reevaluate your strategy. It seems so obvious. You probably heard it a million times. But guess what? Most people don't. And I can bet that there's a lot of times when you haven't either. You've probably started a strategy and then because it doesn't work, you stop doing it. And that is not how this thing works. Like, obviously there are, part of reevaluating is deciding if something's not working and tossing it out. And part of it is also tweaking things. So reevaluate. You don't create a great strategy right off the bat. It's never going to be perfect right off the bat. And that's why I said this is the one important step that you do until the strategy fits like a glove. So maybe you can't come up with a strategy on your own and you use someone else's, right? You're using someone else's strategy just because you've heard it works and you want to give it a shot, which is perfectly fine. A lot of us have done it. I've done it. It's great. So what you do in that case is you try it out for a bit, give yourself a time period, perhaps, again, kind of measurable. That's part of the measurable thing. Giving yourself a time period does help. And then at that point, you go back and you reevaluate. You're like, okay, how is this working? Okay, I fell off the track this many days. I'm not getting the clients I want. Let's think about this. Let's think about the stuff I'm doing that seems to be working and the stuff I'm doing that maybe just isn't working for me. And then you also, again, bring in the stuff that you're good at and be like, okay, so what am I doing here that is, maybe it's part of my weaknesses. Maybe I've discovered now that it's my weakness and I'm not good at it. Well, how can I incorporate my strengths into this? How can I, find another way? This is what reevaluating is all about. Asking yourself the questions, seeing if you could tweak anything. And maybe you run into a situation, let's just say it's like a LinkedIn strategy, and you decide to okay, I feel like I've tried a million different things, or maybe I feel like my audience just isn't here. It's just not here. I don't think it's going to work. Toss it out. Don't need LinkedIn anymore. I mean, you don't have to get rid of it entirely, but it's one other method for visibility. It doesn't hurt to have it, but what's the point of putting a lot of effort into something and time if it's not giving you any returns? So that's one of those things where even if, even as you're reevaluating, you don't have to tweak everything a million times over. At some point, maybe you can just kind of toss it out. Just go, nope, don't need this anymore. Maybe you're running, you start a podcast and it's you've gone for a decent bit and it's just not working for you. Maybe your audience just doesn't listen to podcasts. And you can do market research on this, right? To know where your audience is. And you'll find over time, you're going to go on places where they probably aren't, and you're going to be frustrated with that. And eventually you'll kind of figure out where your audience is at and how to find them and how to reach them. But again, it takes reevaluating. Don't just give up on something. Look at it and be like, is there something different I can do? So for example, let's say you have a time management strategy where you're planned in some ways, you planned 8-hour days every day for 5 days a week. Let's just say that that's what you did, right? And you couldn't do it. It just didn't work out that way. Well, maybe it's time to tweak it and be like, okay, so 6-hour days. Let's try that instead. And you tweak some of your strategy in between, and maybe you do that instead. Or maybe marketing strategy, maybe posting 6 days a week wasn't working for you. and you see that's not getting you the results you want. Well, was it the content you were posting? Was it how often you were posting? Like, these are questions you consider, and then you tweak it a bit and try something new. Maybe it's like, okay, well, I'm actually really good in front of the camera, so let's post more videos. Let's see how that does. Reevaluate. You keep reevaluating, keep experimenting. That's also part of this reevaluation process. And, keep just always, like, you're never going to keep a strategy for a long period of time. Again, unless it fits like a glove, unless it's perfect, it works for you. But even if something's kind of working for you, but maybe like you have like a next step goal, keep reevaluating. You just keep doing that. Keep switching things up. Always important. And it's also important to reevaluate because, as we know, as online, a lot of things change, right? Like algorithms change, our life changes, like all sorts of things happen. So you have to constantly be reevaluating, even if you find something that works for you, because then you can see if things maybe are changing, like an algorithm is changing or something in your life is changing. You need to work around that. And this is important to do. Be flexible. You always have to be flexible. And I know it sounds, again, obvious, but a lot of people are going to get frustrated because they're like, oh, this works for me, but then all of a sudden it doesn't. And that can be frustrating. But rather than being frustrated, you just think, okay, well, now I just got to reevaluate again. The more you practice reevaluating, the easier it's going to be to do it. The easier it's going to be like, oh, okay, well, this isn't really working. Okay, let's back to the drawing board. And it doesn't mean you go back to the very beginning, because obviously once you've understood yourself and you start writing all that down, you have that done. And once you're used to making strategies and answering all of those questions from before, it becomes like second nature. So you just keep doing it until it becomes a habit. And then next thing you know, you're going to have like an eagle eye for reevaluating. You're going to be like, oh, I see that thing happened. Maybe I need to incorporate more of that, or maybe I need to look out for that. It becomes a lot easier, I promise. So those are the 3 steps to building these strategies that are unique to you, are actionable, you can actually take action on them, and are purpose-driven, have a reason behind doing them. Always important. So if you have any questions about this, again, like I mentioned, you can email me at the email here on the screen, and I will also have this information kind of below so you can see it. Should be down there, somewhere down there. You can also find me on social media. I'm at Domi the Biz Coach pretty much everywhere. I think actually everywhere. Yeah, I'm not hard to find. On Facebook, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. I usually am pretty active there. And again, in the Facebook group, which is called Personality Typology and Entrepreneurship. So if you're interested in learning more about personality typology and how it works together with your business and talking more about all of that, then come join the group. We would love to have you, and I will be there to answer questions and all of that. And you have any value to offer there too as well. I'm always, obviously always welcome people posting in it. So please do. Finally, I have a coaching program, which I've mentioned about 1 million times throughout this, or at least a few times. So I do have a coaching program. It's called the Overcome Overwhelm one-on-one coaching program. And the point of it, as I mentioned before, is to overcome overwhelm and develop clarity and confidence and excitement in your business. So whether you're just starting out or you've started out and you're kind of still trying to tweak strategies, I'm here for you. We start out by going through, understanding you, basically all of these steps. We understand you and your personality types, perhaps, and see how you work and how you function and how we're going to best be able to get to where you want to go. And of course, point out all the things that are maybe going to be blocks for you so that I can call you out on them. I do that. And then, of course, we're going to help you actually build the strategies and figure out what to do. And then we're going to also reevaluate over the course, because as I said, it's really important. So I'm going to help you reevaluate what's working and what isn't working and kind of tweak it a little bit. And with my help, you'll be able to kind of do that like a pro on your own. So it's going to be great, I swear. So I'm actually opening up 2 more early bird discount slots. So now for a total of 3, because I had 1 open before, but I decided to open up 2 more. So I have 3 more because I think I can handle it. So, and it's like over 40% off. So it's a big steal. So if you're interested in that, please reach out to me and I'd be happy to hop on a quick call with you and just chat. Like, no pressure, no commitment. just chat, hear about your business, what struggles you're having, and we'll see what we can work with. So that is the end of the webinar. So if you would like, again, if any of that didn't make any sense, please reach out to me with questions. Or if you'd like someone to help walk you through the process, again, I have a coaching program and I'd be more than happy to help you with that. And obviously walk you through personality typology and kind of getting you to understand yourself and helping you point out strengths and weaknesses, and goals and visions and desires and motivations and fears and all of that really cool stuff. Really, really cool stuff. So if you're interested in any of that, let me know. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, again, let me know. Thank you guys for joining. I really enjoyed talking to you about this. So I will see you all on the flip side. Bye.